Let's talk about one of the most stunning military disasters in all of ancient history, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. This is an incredible story about how an empire, at the absolute peak of its power, was brought to its knees by the ultimate act of betrayal.
So let's start with a number, 20,000. That's roughly how many highly trained, battle-hardened Roman soldiers, we're talking 3 entire legions, marched into the deep forests of Germania.
And in just 3 days, they were gone, completely wiped off the face of the earth. It was a catastrophe so total, so absolute, it sent a shockwave through the entire Roman Empire.
So, that's the big question we're tackling today, right? How could the most dominant, most terrifying military machine the world had ever seen get so completely and utterly destroyed? Well, the answer is a crazy story of trust, betrayal, and a perfectly laid trap.
To really get the scale of this disaster, you have to picture the world in 9 CE. Rome wasn't just some empire, it was the unstoppable machine. And its next big project was conquering the vast, wild territory known as Germania.
And for the Romans, this wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. They were moving in, systematically pacifying tribes and just absorbing the region. The full conquest was seen as, inevitable, just a matter of time. And you can see their strategy right here. They weren't just showing up with swords. They were brilliant administrators. They were building roads, setting up forts, and putting their own legal and tax systems in place. They were literally paving the way for a new Roman province.
The man in charge of all this was Governor Varus. Now, he was an experienced guy, and he was confident because he was using a system that had worked for Rome for centuries. You find local leaders and you make them your allies. But his total, unwavering trust in that system, and in one man in particular, was about to be a fatal mistake. Because this entire disaster, this whole story, really hinges on the actions of one man, an insider who played the long game and pulled off one of the most devastating betrayals in all of history. His name was Arminius, and to the Romans, he was one of them, a loyal ally, a decorated military officer, even a close friend to the governor. But in secret, he was the mastermind of their complete and utter destruction.
I mean, just look at this. It's like 2 completely different people living in one body. On one side, you have the perfect Roman success story. A Germanic prince who gets a Roman education, citizenship, even a high military rank. But on the other side, he's secretly using that very status to unite his people and plot against the empire that gave him everything. He was playing both sides with deadly precision. So, with the tribes secretly on his side, Arminius just needed one more thing: to get the Roman army exactly where he wanted them. And he was going to use his friendship with Varus to lead him and his entire army straight into the kill zone. And the plan itself was just brilliant in its simplicity. First, he makes up a story about a small, local uprising to give Varus a reason to mobilize his troops. Then, he convinces his buddy Varus to take a shortcut through a dense forest, a route that, surprise, surprise, he had handpicked for the ambush. And the conditions, oh man, they were a complete nightmare for the legions, but absolutely perfect for an ambush. It starts pouring rain, turning the ground into a swamp. The narrow paths force the entire army into this thin, vulnerable line that stretches for miles, slowed to a crawl by their heavy armor and all the supply wagons. They were so far out of their element, it's not even funny. Okay, so the trap is set, the legions are stuck in the mud, Arminius gives the signal, and the forest just erupts into pure chaos and violence.
Now, this wasn't one single battle. No, this was a running, 3-day slaughter. The Germanic warriors used the forest like it was their home, launching these terrifying hit-and-run attacks and then just melting back into the trees before the Romans could even think about forming a proper defense.
And this right here, this explains why the Romans were so helpless. They were masters of the open field battle, where their organized formations were just unbeatable. But in here, all their strengths became weaknesses. The Germanic warriors, on the other hand, fought a guerrilla war that this terrain was practically made for. They were fast, they were silent, and they were absolutely deadly.
And for Varus, the man who had confidently walked his army into this catastrophe, the end was grim. He's trapped, his legions are being cut to pieces all around him, and he knows it's over. He chooses to take his own life rather than face the humiliation of being captured by the man he once called his friend.
When the dust finally settled, the result was just absolute. 3 entire legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, were just
erased from existence. Up to 20,000 men killed. For an empire built on the idea of military invincibility, this wasn't just a defeat, it was a soul-crushing shock. And to add the ultimate insult to injury, the sacred golden eagle standards of the legions were captured, a humiliation that would haunt Rome for generations.
The news of this disaster traveled all the way back to Rome, and when it hit, it sent a shockwave through the entire society. The psychological and strategic impact of this one battle would reshape the empire for centuries to come.
You can really feel the raw agony of this loss in this famous quote from the Emperor Augustus himself. The stories say he was so distraught that for months he would just wander his palace, banging his head against the walls, crying out, "Varus, give me back my legions."
And make no mistake, the long-term impact was absolutely immense. Before the battle, Rome was pushing ever deeper into Germania. After the battle, they pulled back. The Rhine River became a permanent, heavily fortified border. Germanic independence was basically secured, and Rome's aura of invincibility was just shattered.
So here's the bottom line. This one battle slammed the brakes on Roman expansion into northern Europe. It essentially created the cultural and linguistic dividing line between the Latin-based world to the west and the Germanic world to the east, a divide that, in many ways, still exists today. And that leaves us with a truly fascinating question to think about. What if it had gone the other way? Imagine a world where Germania did become a Roman province, where the people grew up speaking Latin and were absorbed into the empire. How unbelievably different would our world look today? It's just a powerful reminder that sometimes the entire course of history can turn on a single brutal event in a dark, rainy forest.